vengeance!
Hit the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there. I want you to be perfect.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him. He talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver. Pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger. No sweater working for the man, alright. Well, hey. Well, I wanna be a firefighter. Cool-headed when the heat is on, yeah. Save my baby from the burning building. Take all the way to sprinklers on, alright. Well,
No, he didn't slam you, he didn't bump you, he didn't nudge you, he rubbed you. And rubbing, son, is racing.
Hey race fans, welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network. Welcome to Drafting the Circuits. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we break down this past weekend of racing. Before we do that, let me introduce you to the panel I've assembled for you tonight. With me, as always, Mr. Gray Warren from Richard Childress Racing. Mr. Richard Youden is in the house, race engineer, and the NASCAR correspondent at Motorsports Tribune, Seth Eggert, all in the studio tonight. How is everybody?
We're doing great.
Doing good.
Very good, thank you.
All right, great to have everybody here tonight. If we sound a little wore out and beat, we're taping later than usual. We're past the bedtimes for us old guys here, but we'll all stick with it for you. Good weekend of race in Talladega, and then the Formula One cars were in Azerbaijan at the Baku circuit, and we had a Talladega race with kind of an anticlimactic finish, and at the same time we had a Formula One race with a bit of a wild finish, which is seems to defy logic. But let's start off with Talladega. Our winner was Joey Logano, who's his first win of the season, punches his card to get him into the chase. Like Seth was telling me earlier off the air, it's the sixth recent restrictor plate win for the Penske guys. All the Ford cars were strong. Paul Menard took his first stage win. Keselowski took the early stage win. So, Gray, Seth, let's talk about Talladega a little bit.
Yeah, it was by some accounts it was tame. Only really was a couple of skirmishes, one big 14-car wreck. I think. Took out some contenders, but I thought it was like all the restrictor plate races. It was captivating. You were going to sit there and watch it, and it had its storylines. The biggest of which you've already alluded to, the dominance of the Fords again. We saw Kevin Harvick blister the field and winning the pole. And, of course, we had some issues and we'll back up a little bit. We had some issues on Friday that occurred and caused NASCAR to make a rule change and change the size of the restrictor plate after practice on Friday. They thought the speeds were getting a little bit too high, and we had an incident on the backstretch where Jamie McMurray cut down a left rear tire, got sideways, and was hit by Ryan Newman and tumbled his car down the backstretch. I think, some seven
and a half times.
Yeah, that was very reminiscent of the pre-roof flap day kind of wrecks that we would see on the bigger tracks. Yeah, it was a scary moment for Jamie, but he was unhurt.
I think if the car had probably not been hit by Newman and kind of what got it up in the air, the car the roof flaps may have deployed and kept it on the ground, but we'll never know that. That, along with the speed that Ty Dillon showed in the first practice, kind of concerned NASCAR, and they issued a bulletin soon after practice on Friday and reduced the size of the restrictor plates to kind of, in the interest of safety, they said.
What was the speed that Ty Dillon ran?
He was 202, I believe, something like that.
He was 204.
Oh, it was 204, okay.
204, and in the second practice, right before McMurray went airborne, they had run a lap that was 202.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about.
Okay,
yeah.
so we're still well off the pre-restrictor plate like
sure.
Bill Elliott kind of time. So, yeah, but I guess 202 is fast enough for them to take a hard look at that and try to go on the side of safety. So, I'm sorry, Greg, continue.
Well, the guys are, I don't care what NASCAR does. These guys constantly work on trying to regain anything that NASCAR takes away from them, and that's just the nature of the beast. But they slowed them down a little bit, and then of course we go into it. But the Ford continued its dominance in qualifying and in the race. And we were talking, pre-show of the good job that the Ford teams did in working together. They met as a group before the race and decided they were going to work together to almost ensure that a Ford would end up in victory lane. And you could see that throughout the race as the Ford cars continually worked together throughout the race. And we'd seen that before. We saw it some last year. I think Toyota used a similar strategy in some of the plate races last year too. But Ford was very dominant, and it led to a Joey Logano win, his first of the season and his first in over a year since the race last year at the encumbered win that he had last year at Richmond a year and a week actually away. So yeah, and by some accounts it was a little tame. I thought it was somewhat competitive in the mid, but nothing like we thought. I did hear a report when they were listening to the pre-race over the radio, and they interviewed Keselowski, and he was alluding to how hard the cars were to drive, this time at Talladega, and he thought there would be a lot of carnage throughout the race. That prophecy didn't hold true. There was 2 incidents, one big one, like we said, that took out that would involve 14 cars. But and that was basically caused when two Hendrick cars were racing together, and I believe Jimmy just got loose in front and came down and hit Byron, and then of course everybody else was kind of swept up in it. But you kept kind of waiting. It's like a typical Talladega race. You keep waiting for the big one. It seemed throughout the day that it could happen at any moment. But just only those 2 incidents, and pretty much we got through it without a really huge wreck. It took out basically half the field like we've seen sometimes in multiple wrecks.
And one other thing, they also took away the adjustable track bar, the driver adjustable track bar from the cars. They allowed the teams to have them at Daytona. But a lot of the drivers, if not all of the drivers, used it to skew the car to try to get more downforce, more horsepower, and that ultimately caused some of the wrecks at Daytona. Yeah, so NASCAR took it away for Talladega.
Yeah, and that's a departure from last year. Last year they didn't allow them to have the track bar at the speedway races. So when they went to Daytona this winter, they were allowed it for the first time. So I guess after they saw what was happening there at Daytona, they decided, and that's a good move probably. Yeah.
And not only did we have the Cup Series in action, we had the Xfinity Series in action. And in the Xfinity Series, it was a relatively tame race, just like the Cup Series. And at one point, it was a fuel mileage race. Justin Allgaier was in the lead by nearly 12 seconds, drafting with a bunch of cars that were on the tail end of the lead lap, trying to save enough fuel to make it to the finish. And it was a cut tire by Daniel Hemrick that ended up re-racking the field. Under caution, Allgaier ran out of fuel. David Starr ran out of fuel.
There was a number of them.
I think Brandon Jones ran out of fuel. Austin Cindric ran out on the restart. But coming to the checkered, Allgaier and Elliott Sadler, who both had their own issues, were able to make it up through the middle, finish, I think, 3rd and 4th. Spencer Gallagher took the win, and it was an exciting finish. Gallagher earned his first win. It was his first win for GMS Racing. Unfortunately, there are circumstances that came out today on Wednesday. that we'll get to in a little bit. But all in all, it was an exciting race, and it was actually the first time in Xfinity Series history that a Cup driver was not in the field at Talladega, and that's because of Dash for Cash rules.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you something. I'm not a big fan of these last several races where they've had this Dash for Cash thing and they've eliminated the Cup drivers. Basically, and I've talked to different fans. We went out to a sports bar to watch Sunday's race, and I was talking with some other fans there, and we were talking about the Xfinity races, and there was, from the group of people I was talking about, there was not a lot of interest in that race in the last few Xfinity races, simply because there was not, the field in the race, there was not a lot of people that were household names, so to speak. And I don't know. I mean, I understand why NASCAR's trying to do it, and they're trying to get these guys to push these young guys that are in the series. But I'm telling you, I don't know if it's the right tact to go by NASCAR to take these Cup drivers out of the show. I think not only do they add to it, basically, they're marquee names, and they bring a lot of eyeballs to those particular races. What do you guys think? I mean, what do you?
I personally like the idea, and I do agree that there should be Cup drivers in the field at least at some point in the year. But it was getting to the point where Cup drivers were dominating so much that I want to say in 2013, I may have my year wrong, but in the year 2012 or 2013, Xfinity Series regulars only won 3 races.
Yeah, I mean, I know, and it's been more times than not that's been the case, and I agree with you. The year that I think that Austin Dillon won the championship, he won it without winning a single race, and I think that particular year there was only 2 wins or so, 2 or 3 wins.
2 were by Sam Hornish Jr. I know that.
Yeah. And basically he was somewhat considered a Cup driver in some regard, but yeah, I'm an old school guy, and I go back to I got my career started back in the old Busch Grand National days when that was pretty much a standalone series and had established its own stars in that sport, and we saw people come along and they would establish themselves in that series before they moved up. I think part of part of the problem that we're seeing with Xfinity now is these kids move up way too quick. They'll come along, they'll come up and have this meteoric rise through 1 year of K&N. They'll win a few races, and then they'll automatically because they've got money, they'll end up in a truck, top flight truck ride. They'll spend 1 year there, and then they automatically go up to so it's really they don't really have a following by the time they get to Xfinity, and I think that in itself lends to a little bit of, and to some degree, disinterest.
I think that's a factor for some of the drivers, maybe not all of them, but I do agree that it is a factor.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm going to say it's good for the guys, obviously, that are in it. It's good for guys like Bell and Brandon Jones and Daniel Hemrick and some of those guys. But I'm a believer in those guys learn a lot from racing those Cup guys. Ultimately, and I know why they try to do that. I think the jury's still out on how this is going to happen. I guess if it'll have to be a little bit more in-depth study to see if it's actually hurting the series, hurting attendance. Because, as we know, support race attendance has been down the last several years, and I don't think that's because of other factors that we've seen, because attendance is down all the way across the board. TV ratings are I'd have to see how that goes. But then again, the Xfinity TV ratings, you really can't compare apples to apples because a lot of times those races end up on cable TV anyway, and you're not going to get the eyeballs that you would have if they were on network TV. So, yeah, it's just, I guess it's a matter of just personal preference when you look at those and see what you think, if you need more Cup drivers in the field to kind of spice the show up.
Yeah, it kind of defies the logic of what would be good to promote the sport. NASCAR as a whole. There was an article that came out today in Forbes magazine discussing NASCAR's declining ratings, declining attendance. It's same old. But they had mentioned that that Talladega was a 28% drop in TV ratings. They said that Bristol had the rain out and whatnot, but it's come out that the pre-sales there only sold 48,000 tickets pre-sale. So obviously, if the top series is struggling, the support series is struggling mightily. So why take the few things that are good about the support series and make it give people even less reason to tune in, because
but Talladega had a good on-hand crowd there.
They did. It looked like it was down slightly from years past, but it still had a really good crowd, though. Still a lot of folks there in the stands.
And I was a little curious how that was going to be, going into Talladega just to see what the Earnhardt effect would be, because basically, he's a huge fan favorite when they go to Talladega. But, attendance is down all across the board, and we talk about it all the time. And it's not only, IndyCar's facing the same battle. IndyCar's making some inroads, but still, IndyCar's TV ratings are still, NASCAR just, is going to win that battle still, even with declining ratings.
Oh, yeah. IndyCar's just a small footprint on the racing landscape right now. I mean, they've made gains, but they're still, it's, the tallest pygmy,
Yeah, and they're having issues at certain tracks, putting fans in the stands too, as we saw at Phoenix. But I'm of the mindset that whether you're a fan of IndyCar or whether you're a fan of NASCAR, basically a rising tide is going to float all boats. So NASCAR's success will help IndyCar and vice versa. I believe that. And just for American motorsports in general. And I think, basically, we've seen some declines. I don't know what the answer is. I think some of the issues we've talked about before on the show are more societal than anything. I think it's just so many other things to do. We're seeing the same thing in other major sports too. NBA, NFL, MLB, they're all a victim of declining ratings and some things like that too. So I don't know. I just think basically we just, as society changes, motorsports is going to have to find a way to kind of keep up with those changes and bring a product to market that appeals.
Absolutely, yeah.
And speaking of societal issues and stuff like that, as I alluded to a little bit earlier, some news came out today. Spencer Gallagher, who won at Talladega, NASCAR had suspended him indefinitely for violating the substance abuse policy. They have not said what substance. Gallagher has not said what substance. He is going to go into the Road to Recovery program. This knocks him out of the Xfinity Series playoffs. It knocks him out of the Dash for Cash, putting Ryan Sieg in. Ryan Sieg was the next eligible driver for the Dash for Cash.
Who are the four that are eligible in it?
As of now, it's Brandon Jones, Justin Allgaier, Elliott Sadler, and Ryan Sieg.
And that's for this weekend's race at Dover.
That's for this weekend, and this weekend is the last Dash for Cash race of the season.
Okay.
it's a family-owned team, GMS Racing, so once Gallagher goes through the program, it's expected that he'll return to the ride. They say the program takes about 4 to 6 weeks. As of right now, Johnny Stoller, who drives the number 21 truck for GMS Racing, will fill in for Gallagher at Dover, and more than likely will fill in at Charlotte in 2 weeks as well.
Okay.
So let me ask you guys this, because I'm not really familiar with NASCAR's drug testing policy. So is it, are they just randomly ask for samples, or is everyone expected to produce a sample at a certain time, or, or is there a if somebody tipped him off, or if there was a suspicion?
Well, he probably got busted on random. I'm almost certain, it had to be random. All NASCAR crew members that are going to get a license or a hard card credential are required to go through preseason drug testing. That's all preseason. And then at various times during the course of the year, they have random tests. You're subject to that. Sometimes, I know I was still going over the wall when this was going on, and when we first started this program, I never had to go through had to have random. My number just never came up. If there is an incident, if you're involved in an incident at the track, an accident or anything like that, then a lot of times they will do a drug test just to kind of clear things up. But then again, drivers are subject to randoms at any time. And it's not unlike any other sport. I can speak to NCAA college baseball. A lot of times, post-game, they will randomly check a player or two from each team. So that's not unusual.
So when you say that somebody is maybe asked to give a sample after an accident at the track, okay, so you're not referring to an on-track incident. You're referring to so similar to like what most workplaces have post-accident drug testing. Yeah, if you have an on-the-job injury, you're gonna be
on pit road.
Right, okay,
or something like that. They would, in some instances, they just require, and basically they're just covering their tracks, and covering the bases.
And that's not unusual at all. Most employers have post-accident drug testing. If you've hurt yourself at work, you're gonna take it. You're gonna pee in a cup.
Yeah, and Richard can speak to this too. When I think when both of us started work at RCR, we had to take a drug test.
Yeah, and I was actually, when I was there, I did have a minor encounter with a high-speed fan blade and took the tip of my finger off, and I had to go through a drug screen test on that as well. So, unfortunately, I wasn't under the influence of anything. It was my own stupidity.
Yeah, but those things aren't uncommon, really. I think, in NASCAR, for years and years and years, NASCAR was probably one of the last major series to go with the drug testing kind of thing. Because when you look at other major sports, the competitors in those sports are somewhat unionized, and they're protected under collective bargaining agreements, where in NASCAR, we're all considered as independent contractors. So they kind of just cleaned that up. I guess it's been probably 10 or more years ago now we've been under those rules.
Yeah, so Seth, back to the story about Mr. Gallagher. So he's going to go through the rehabilitation program, expect to be back in the car, but now, so if he wins another race after he's rehabilitated, or is he's done?
He's done, period, as far as this year's playoffs are concerned. NASCAR is not giving him a waiver. He is going to miss too many races, A, and B, one of the requirements is either you attempt to qualify for all of them, or you attempt to, and if you miss one for injury or some other excused absence, essentially, NASCAR will give you a waiver. For example, back in 2015, Kurt Busch was suspended for 3 races because of the allegations of domestic violence. Those allegations were later to be proven false, and because they were proven false, NASCAR granted him a waiver.
Right, and of course, famously, Tony Stewart and younger Busch brother Kyle were also granted waivers, and Kyle, after missing 11 races, won the championship a few years ago.
Exactly.
So, but Spencer Gallagher's not gonna. This is not going to be. This is not going to be an excused absence, huh?
The comment is, if he was given a waiver, it would be a vacation and not a punishment.
I agree. I agree fully. So, well, let's just keep positive thoughts. That you said. What did you tell me? The statement from the team was it was just a lapse in judgment or one-time lapse in judgment.
The statement from Gallagher was this was a one-time error in judgment.
Yep, and we've all done crazy things when we're young too. So,
and before we'll go ahead.
Speak for yourselves.
No, Gray, you first.
No, I was going to say before we get away from the Talladega news, we have to mention that former NASCAR driver James Hylton,
yes,
and his son were killed early Saturday morning, returning from Talladega, where they had competed in the ARCA race on Friday. They were killed in a traffic accident at the Georgia-South Carolina line. And here at Drafting the Circus, we want to extend our condolences to the Hylton family. James Hylton was one of the first really notable privateers in our sport. He finished second 3 times in the NASCAR championship over the years. He was a 2-time winner and was the 1966 Rookie of the Year in NASCAR. So it's a shame. I knew James Hylton. I ran into him not too terribly long ago at one of our vendors down in Mooresville and talked with him for a little while. He was one of the good guys in our sport. One of the pioneers, if you will. He still raced in ARCA up until his 80s. And I believe he was 82 years old at the time of his death last weekend.
And he is the oldest driver to attempt to make the Daytona 500 field. Yep. His crew chief, who was driving the truck at the time, Terry Strange, he survived with some broken bones. I believe he has been released from the hospital. What he said happened was he was trying to avoid a collision with another vehicle, and when he stomped on the brakes essentially to avoid it, the truck jackknifed.
So we're talking, this was the race hauler?
Yes. I believe the race hauler is more of a bus with a trailer, but yes.
That's very, very unfortunate. Yeah, obviously their families in all of our thoughts. So,
yeah.
And Gray, you first. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just going to echo what Frank just said, but go right ahead.
Yeah, and I was going to say this came right on the heels of the announcement that NASCAR was going to acquire ARCA, and people at the racetrack were joking with James, welcoming him back to NASCAR as a team owner because of that announcement. So at least he got to know he was back in NASCAR.
Yeah, and like I said, the Hyltons were a fixture in our sport for many, many years, and James will be sorely missed.
Now, speaking of the ARCA acquisition, okay, what do you feel like NASCAR's long-term plans are with ARCA? Because they've got trucks, they've got Xfinity, they got their own kind of ladder series. ARCA falls right in there somewhere. The cars are similar. Are they looking for another rung on their own ladder, or are they looking to merge this with Xfinity? Or I know we're going to be, it's going to be it's not going to be a quick process. There's they're going to run autonomously for a year or two, or
for a year,
right? But what do you think is behind this? Are they going to dissolve it? Amalgamate it into their own ladder series, or try to build it up?
Well, the cars are more similar to the K&N Pro Series cars, the regional series.
Right, which is owned by NASCAR, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
But I think, at least from what I've heard, there's still a lot of details to go into this, a lot of planning and a lot of scheduling. But some of what I've heard is pairing the ARCA series with the Truck Series, and also having combination races at some short tracks with the K&N Pro Series to essentially try to build up the lower tier series, the support series, which we said earlier, in some senses, have been struggling attendance-wise. The acquisition of ARCA also will give NASCAR 4 tracks: Lucas Oil Raceway, Salem Speedway, Toledo Speedway, and the mile dirt track at the Coin.
Right. I don't see NASCAR really coming in and making any wholesale changes. If anything, I think like Seth said, they have an opportunity to kind of bolster both series and by combining some shows together. One thing that I think ARCA is a pretty solid organization. The one thing that they have, and I've talked to several ARCA teams this week, one of the drawbacks that ARCA has right now is they have some deficiencies in their inspection process. NASCAR will be able to strengthen those to a degree.
Yeah, Richard's laughing.
Well, I mean, you go to some ARCA races, and some of the stuff that goes, particularly some of the back market teams that go through, some of the stuff can be almost laughable. But I think it'll add a little structure to a little more structure to ARCA's current situation.
And another part of ARCA's current situation, they signed a exclusive deal with the people who run their website right before the social media boom. And that's one of the main reasons why you don't see a lot of social media buzz about ARCA during their ARCA races or in general a lot of the time, because they and their teams are stuck with that agreement, which, thanks to NASCAR essentially acquiring ARCA, will at some point be null and void, allowing ARCA to try to build up its fan base. It already has a decent-sized fan base, but who knows what it could have been had ARCA been able to take advantage of the social media boom.
Right, and I can't see NASCAR. ARCA has a very large footprint in the Midwest. I can't see NASCAR coming in and trying to upset that apple cart. I like Seth. I think, with NASCAR's marketing tools and their power, they can come in and enhance that situation.
Yeah, so we'll just have to see how things play out over the next couple of years with ARCA now under the NASCAR umbrella. But before we move on to talk about this interesting Formula One race we had over in Azerbaijan, let's talk briefly about the upcoming NASCAR race at the Monster Mile, where we got Miles the Monster, which is still the coolest trophy in NASCAR. I don't care who you are, other than the grandfather clock. Yeah, I like that one too. But who do we like for Dover? Dover, I tend to think of Jimmy Johnson, who's won several races there, and Jimmy, who's in dire need of a win. Jimmy just can't catch a break this year. So, Seth, who do you like for Dover?
Martin Truex Jr.
All right. And Gray?
Yeah, I think, basically we have seen seeing the intermediate tracks come down to just, basically it's Ford versus Toyota, and Chevrolet being just racing for what's left. I think Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott may have a little something to say about that. And you just mentioned the fact that, Jimmy Johnson is the leading active winner there. Obviously, that'd be a nice place for him to get well there too. Just don't know, what we're going to see from Chevrolet right now. I still think, it's going to be a Ford-Toyota battle. I'm going to go with, let's see here. I'm going to go with Keselowski.
Okay, very good pick. And Richard, who do you like for Dover?
Kyle Busch.
Kyle Busch. And I'm going to go with Kevin Harvick. He's a former Dover winner, and he just kind of been hot everywhere this year. I think this is Harvick's year to win it all again, but I'm sure guys like Kyle Busch, Martin Truex, and Keselowski have something to say about that. So,
it's a triple header weekend too, as well. All three touring series will be in action at Dover. The trucks will run Friday, and the Xfinity cars will run on Saturday. And like Seth said a few minutes ago, this will be the final Dash for Cash race of the season for the Xfinity drivers.
All right, so we'll look forward to a great weekend of racing in Dover, but let's look back on a pretty interesting weekend in Azerbaijan. When they added this track to the schedule a couple of years, we all weren't sure what to think. It was, the Monaco of the Mideast, the narrow track, winds around a castle, beautiful scenery, and it's turned out to not disappoint. It's been a pretty entertaining race every year, and Richard, we saw your favorite driver, Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton benefit from some of the misfortune of others to take his first win of the season, Mercedes' first win of the season, largely at the expense of his own teammate who just about had the race won there. So, Richard, let's rehash Baku for a few minutes.
Oh, wow, yeah. How long have we got left?
You got 25 minutes. Plenty of time.
Okay.
Plenty of time.
We may get the first few laps in. Yeah, I mean, as you say, when the track first came in, everybody was sort of hyping it up as this really fast street circuit. And it's sort of the first year, it was a bit of an anticlimax. But then, last year and this year, it's been like, okay, yeah, this is what it's meant to be like. An action-packed race with safety cars left and right. And, these guys really sort of pushing themselves to the limit. As I say, that's what the track was made for. You look at, because last year the infamous instance with Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton in the safety car period, and pretty early on in the race you got the same scenario where you had, the safety car out, you had roles reversed a little bit here, you had Vettel in the front with Hamilton behind. Leading up to that, you had a couple of potentially very, very nasty incidents. Alonso got caught up with Sorokin at least, and potentially Ericsson as well, I think, was involved in a little coming together there. That put Sorokin out the race, and Alonso had immense damage there. Both right side tyres were punctured, holes in bodywork, bits of electronics hanging out all over the place, and Alonso did remarkably well to get that car back out there and complete the race. But under the first safety car period there was some comments by Hamilton that maybe Vettel wasn't exactly playing by the rules and was sort of checking up and not accelerating and holding the role that the leader should do when the safety car pulls in. But you got this situation again where the Ferrari appeared to be the dominant car and was starting to pull away. Further back in the pack, you had some excellent racing. Excuse me, between the two Red Bull cars with Verstappen and Ricciardo there. Fantastic racing, and it was always getting a little bit close. And unfortunately, inevitable was bound to happen. And going down into turn one, Ricciardo got a run on Verstappen with the DRS, and he just Verstappen weaved in front of him a couple of times there and just basically ran into the back of him. To a certain extent, a racing incident, and they've both been reprimanded rather than any, punishment in terms of penalties or, points deductions or whatever it may be, which I think is probably the right decision to make. It was, Verstappen definitely made his car very, very wide going into turn one, but also Ricciardo, he probably overcommitted and probably would have, probably should have realised who he was racing against here and given him a little bit of a wider berth there, but maybe a little bit naive by Ricciardo.
Richard,
yep.
In your eyes, whose fault was that?
I would say 75% Verstappen, 25% Ricciardo.
All right, there you go.
And then the race was going to restart with 10 laps left potentially. You'd seen the situation where Bottas had stayed out for a very, very long time, hoping for a safety car, and to his, the timing of everything worked out perfectly there with that safety car, and he was able to get ahead of Vettel on track. So you were set up for like a 10-lap showdown basically between Bottas and Vettel. Probably, Hamilton just didn't really have the pace to sort of keep up with those two guys. And then as there were tyre warming coming to the restart, Grosjean was hit by Ericsson, who was at least 20 car lengths behind him at the time. It was quite amazing, really, that it was almost like Mario Kart, where the sort of banana skin got thrown out, and Grosjean was adamant that Ericsson hit him, which, as the replay show, certainly didn't happen. It was a fantastic race, and then of course, to make matters worse, once they did get restarted for Bottas, his tyre failed after hitting some debris with 2 laps to go. So there was Hamilton just sort of inherited a win that really he hadn't been at the races all weekend, and walks away with the trophy and now the championship lead, I believe. So you couldn't make it up.
He's four points clear of Vettel in the standings.
Yeah,
which it kind of blows my mind because Vettel's been so good this year, but that's Formula One math.
But that's been Vettel made a very ambitious move on Bottas on the restart and probably gave away a solid second place and sacrificed that, and I think finished 4th overall.
Yeah, he pretty much threw his race away. That's and I was like, that was all on him. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the issue in China where he was hit by Verstappen, and again probably did well to finish that race. So, it's been a little bit scrappy by all of the major contenders. And hey, the fans aren't going to complain about that. The fans have been crying out and calling for unpredictable races where nobody knows what's going to happen, and certainly we've been blessed with that for the first 4 races of the season so far. You're almost waiting for one of the manufacturers to sort of grab 2018 by the scruff of the neck and really go out and dominate now.
That's what I'm afraid of. Now that Hamilton's won one, he's going to be unstoppable. Yeah, because we've seen it before.
That's what you saw back in, I think it was 2012 off the top of my head, when you had like the first 7 races were won by 7 different drivers. Then when you went to the sort of summer break they're having in Formula One, post that summer break, Red Bull came back and I think won every race or something, something along those lines. So, you were, to a certain extent, you're worried that somebody's going to say, right, okay, lads, come on, stop messing around. This is how we do it. And,
Formula One's not supposed to be this entertaining. Stop it, boys.
Exactly. And the only sort of interesting sort of post Azerbaijan news that's came out from there has been everybody was sort of waxing about how great the last 2 races have been at Azerbaijan, but now there's a rumour that Miami is going to take over Azerbaijan's slot on the grid. There's even talk of the promoter of Azerbaijan actually selling all of his pit equipment and pit lane structures to the Miami promoters, which would be a real shame if that happened, because you finally got a street circuit out there that is fast. Monaco's a classic, and that's never going to change. But you've also, you've got your Singapores these days, which are, that's that's gaining a reputation of being almost a classic circuit now with its night race. But
so we're talking Miami, Florida.
Yes. Miami 2019.
But where is the street circuit?
Yes.
There's
going to be
they've tried that a couple times with Indy cars and Tom Miami Park, and So I mean, we'll see. I mean, it's a big market.
Is the race in Baku losing money?
It's a Bernie thing, wasn't it? That was one of Bernie's things. Maybe Liberty are trying to, distance themselves, and obviously Liberty being a US-based organization, there's no secret they want US-based races. Yeah. There's no secret they want a second race over here.
Yeah, I mean the other one they were floating for a while was Vegas, but I would prefer Miami to Vegas. I think make a better race. So
the best one that was ever muted was the on the shore of the Hudson in Newark or New Jersey, overlooking the Hudson and the skyline there. I mean, that would have been a spectacle.
They were never gonna get that one done just because of. New York City, New Jersey, red tape. It's the same thing that killed the Grand Prix of Boston for IndyCar. That was never going to happen. There's too many palms to grease. Too many palms to grease. So now, Seth, you want to get some comments about the race here, some comments about Formula One. I know you've been sitting kind of quietly in the wings waiting for a spot to jump in. So, Seth, here's your spot. Jump on in.
Yeah, as far as the two Red Bull drivers are concerned, I know it was more of a racing deal, but what's the saying that no matter what motorsport it is, number one rule, do not wreck your teammate? That's all I was thinking that entire time watching the replays. And as I'm sitting there watching the race, I look at the leaderboard and I'm like, oh, both Haas F1 cars are in the top 10. They'll both score points today. Not even 10 seconds after I make the comment, they show Grosjean's car destroyed up against the wall.
Yeah.
And I don't know how embarrassing it is, but I don't think it can be any more embarrassing than to destroy your car under a safety car.
Probably entering the pit lanes is probably the only one worse.
But I tell you, the thing that struck me is during the first third of the race, the battle for fourth, fifth, sixth.
Oh, you saw the Renaults up there,
right? And that was incredible racing. Yeah, that was incredible racing.
One guy that I think deserves a huge mention is Charles Leclerc in the Sauber to bring it home. Sixth, was it? I think sixth place finish in the Sauber is fantastic, and fantastic, and certainly needs a huge mention. And I think if you were to pick they do it on the TV, a driver of the day sort of award. To my mind, that's Leclerc all day long. I thought he was fantastic.
And we've been looking at him for a few years as a rising star and a talent.
It was really Baku last year where he won. I think he got pole, fastest lap, and the race win, which is phenomenal achievement at any level of motorsport. But it came, I think it was 2 days after his father passed away last year. So, incredible mental strength to do something like that. And this guy's a rising star, I think. Obviously, we talked about this actually off air last week. How these guys are going to shuffle out and end up in one of these seats that arguably they deserve, and I'm sure that's something for another day that we can talk on the show.
Well, sure. Leclerc's going to end up in a Ferrari. I'll bet money on that right now. He'll be replacing Kimi in 2020, maybe earlier.
Well, Kimi's only got a contract to the end of this year, and there's rumours that...
That's why I say maybe earlier, yeah.
Pre-contract agreement with Ferrari. Is Ferrari going to want to ditch Vettel? Who knows?
We don't know. It's a lot of politics in Formula One, so...
Of course there are. But yeah, as I say, that's a whole show in itself.
Let me throw something out there when we're talking about the last couple of races have been, like I said, you go into this, and Formula One has almost become somewhat NASCAR-esque, with the safety cars coming out and changing the complexion of the race, much like they do on a weekly basis in Cup racing. It's kind of weird, that everybody flounders and gets upset with NASCAR being like that. But, when we see it in Formula One, it actually produces a compelling, very entertaining race.
Well, it's interesting. One of the things that I've taken away, especially this year, and we've seen it on 2 or 3 occasions now, is the way that Mercedes have approached this season and a lot of the strategy calls that you've seen. In the past, and they run a post-race every week, they put a YouTube video online saying about, we did this, we did that, we got our strategy right, blah, 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 all weekend. And, I wouldn't say there's a certain air of arrogance about it, but it did come across that way a little bit. This year they're like, oh, well, we did, they've almost had to eat a little bit of the old humble pie sort of thing. Because
it's bit them, their strategy has bit them several times.
Well, and also they're not so dominant. I mean, in the past, they were probably so dominant, they probably made strategy mistakes, but got away with it.
Right, they were covered up by just their sheer speed.
And I think at least 3 races this year. I don't think there was a safety car in Bahrain, was there? I'm trying to remember. I think that was the one race where there hasn't been a safety car, but outside of that, there's been one at every race or a virtual safety car of one form or another, and it's caught every team out, or it's caught Mercedes out. And it's interesting
it caught
how
Ferrari this weekend.
Yeah, so I mean. But you could also counter-argue that the Mercedes did play the strategy right with Bottas by leaving him out a long time, so that when the safety car did come out, he could go onto the super soft tyres. Now, of course, we had the issue where his tyre failed due to hitting debris late in the race. But what would have been interesting would have been Ferrari's call if the pit lane hadn't been. If the cars hadn't had to drive through the pit lane, because as Verstappen and Ricciardo's accident was going down to turn 1, the FIA said to everybody, well, look, we've got to take you through the pit lane because we don't want you driving through all that debris, which is the right decision to make. Now, in doing that, they gave basically, to a certain extent, a free pit stop to Vettel. And he was asking on the radio, hey guys, why did you stop me? I'm now behind Bottas. Well, their reply was, well, if we'd kept you out, yeah, you would have passed Bottas, but he would be on the far faster tyre. Now, that decision to pit him or not would have been a lot different, I think, if they hadn't had to have gone down pit road. So it did that in a way, maybe took away a potential battle at the end of the race where you'd had Bottas trying to catch Vettel on far newer tyres and see how that would have all worked out.
It does make it interesting because, for far too many years, we've seen just where sheer dominance won these races, and luck. Yeah. Basically, there was no luck involved in it. It was just these cars came in, they were prepared, and they won the race. With this now, it brings luck back into the situation where you can have the fastest car, you can have everything going your way, and by the luck of the draw when it comes out, you get caught in it, it can ruin your day.
Oh yeah, and I mean, they've been discussing us this week with regards to the 2019 aero package, and some of the rules that have come out have included changing the front wing end plates and also increasing the slot gap for the DRS to make that more effective. And it was interesting the number of teams that actually voted against that. Again, probably from a fan's perspective, it's great that you have these unknown variables and this. You don't want to use the word luck because at the end of the day, drivers deserve to win races that they win. They put the time and the effort in and they get the rewards for it. But I think only 3 teams voted in favour of these rule changes, and that was at least went to a final sign off in the next couple of weeks. Now there's a chance that Ferrari may veto that and pull their joker card and say no, we're not going to allow that to happen. But that's a whole other story on the political side of Formula One. But,
hey, speaking of DRS, Seth's got a question.
Okay.
Richard, about halfway into the race during the broadcast, they had mentioned that the remote DRS had failed.
Yes. Yeah.
And can you explain that to a relatively new fan like myself, for example, of Formula One?
So my understanding of how this works is there's transponders in the track. So when the car passes over the transponder point, the driver will get and it depends how the team wishes to sort of transfer this information to the driver, but it's an audio beep in the driver's headset, which says, you can now activate your DRS. And the driver can't... So what the driver's not allowed to do is, like, have his finger on the DRS button as they go over the line, and then it automatically open when he's in the correct range. You know, he has to cue that off a feed from timing loops. Now, by sounds of things, that timing loop, there'd been an issue with that. And if you were watching this TV coverage all weekend, you know, every now and again a car would disappear off the track, or, you know, you'd suddenly see a car in second when it was really running fifth or whatever. There was obviously something not quite right with the timing and scoring system there this week. So the teams would get the information, and the teams would be able to relay that to the driver saying, hey, look, you're now within that zone. When you pass the line, you can press that button and it'll be activated. So, they had a few gremlins by sounds of things this weekend.
Yeah, somebody got a penalty for illegal use of DRS. Was it?
It could have been.
Was it one of the Renaults? I'm trying to... I just read a brief...
I think it was one of the Force Indias.
I think it was a Force India.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
Again, it could have been related to that, because in theory, it shouldn't be able to be open outside of those windows. You know, I think there's 2 DRS zones at Baku. Going long start, finish straight, and then also between turn 2 and 3. So
and the cars have to be within a second of one another.
Yeah, so the car has to be within a second of the car in front of it. Now, it doesn't have to be the car in front of it in terms of position, just the car in front of it on track. So you can be about to lap somebody, and it will allow you to open the DRS when you're lapping somebody. Okay. And that car doesn't have to still be in front of you. There's a timing point on the track. So there's 2 points on the track. There's one where the timing delta is determined, and then there's a point where you are allowed to activate your DRS. So
and they're only in certain zones on the track.
Yes,
correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what you can sometimes get a scenario is you pass a point and you're, say 0.2 of a second behind a specific car. You're saying, hey, look, when you get to the activation line, you can open it because you're within the detection zone. You can actually pass that car before you get to the activation line, and then you can activate it and get an extra lead on it. I think Malaysia used to have that as well. That was an interesting one at Malaysia, because you had DRS on the start-finish line and the backstretch, which were sort of, parallel to each other. But there was only one activation zone. So you could actually pass somebody going into the final corner and then still have the same sort of DRS credit going down the start-finish line. So sometimes it can be a little bit confusing. There's been proposals, I know they've done a simulation on, well, look, you can just open it if you're within a second of the car in front, no matter where you are on the track. Personally, I think that'd be quite a good way of doing it, rather than having specific parts, specific zones. But, it's... I know the long-term plan from the Formula One governing body is to go away from DRS, because they see, Ross Brawn's talked about how it's a fake form of motorsport, and it's not really how it should be done.
It's the same thing as push to pass as an IndyCar.
Exactly.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah.
But, I know that, Ross Brawn in a lot of interviews said, look, for 2021, which is when the big next rule change and overhaul is coming, we're going to get away with this, and these cars are going to be designed to be able to pass on raw pace rather than having to rely on an added bonus sort of thing.
It's kind of artificial. It's kind of artificial.
It is, and it's not really where I think
I've never been a big fan of the push to pass in IndyCar either.
The problem with IndyCar is you get both guys doing it at the same time. So where's the advantage?
It washes out. Yeah. So. What makes it exciting is the guy that uses his up, and then he's a sitting duck at the end of the race.
And these teams end up doing so much modelling and simulation on it. They know where the optimum part of the track is to use the push to pass, and everybody will know the same answer. So you end up with a net zero effect, basically.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, speaking of IndyCar, we're right up at the end of our program. We just got. A minute or two less, but be remiss not to mention that Indy cars are on the track at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. They had an open test April 31st and May 1st. And IndyCar fans like to say, is it May yet? Well, guess what? It's May. They held the rookie orientation program and the refresher courses for those that haven't been in a car for a while, including, yes, Seth, April 30th and May 1st. What did I say? Something ridiculous.
April 31st.
You added a day to the calendar.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Julius Caesar added a day to the calendar, too, when he realized his month was shorter than somebody else's. So, but I digress.
Not holding yourself in too high a regard there, are we?
Okay.
Well,
All right, guys. We're running out of time. I just want to get this in here that they had the second test of the windscreen. Scott Dixon had tested it in Phoenix earlier this year. This year they put it on Joseph Newgarden's car. For Indianapolis, yeah.
Dixon.
Oh, did they both run it in Indy?
Yeah, Dixon had it too. Yeah.
Okay, so far I know Newgarden had a little problem with the glare. They tried some things with some tape, and I think by the end of the run there, he was able to see pretty well. Generally positive. Gray, you and I were talking about it earlier off the air. It really doesn't spoil the look of the car at all. I mean, it's basically clear. It looks like a fighter jet cowl, although it doesn't totally cover the driver, so you still got that open helmet.
Aesthetically, it looks fine. I mean, I don't think it'll detract or take away from any car. I think to me it looks better than the Halo does on the F1 cars.
Absolutely, yeah. So, and even what I'm hearing is that IndyCar is sharing their data with the FIA on the windscreen test. Maybe the Formula One may look into the windscreen themselves, but that's all down the road. But we are right up at the end of our time slot, so I'd like to thank the Hoobazoo Radio Network, iHeartRadio, and Spreaker, and iTunes. I want to thank you, Gray Warren, Richard Youden, Seth Eggert. I want to thank all you folks that tune in and listen to us on a weekly basis. We'll be back on in a week to discuss some more racing. Good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Hoobazoo.com.
Enter website, enter website, enter website, enter website.